Last night was UFC 299, Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera 2, and this card was so stacked with so many incredible fighters on the card. We learned a lot from UFC 299, and I'm going to go into my top 3 takeaways from UFC 299. I'm going to start with some honorable mentions, then I'm going to get into my actual list. I'm going to go from 3 to 1, 1 being my biggest takeaway from UFC 299. And honestly, I have a bunch of honorable mentions, so I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to try to go through these briefly, starting off with my first honorable mention. And the reason this is an honorable mention is because we kind of already knew it, but that is that Petr Yan is still the elite of the elite at bantamweight, and Petr Yan can still be bantamweight champion again. It was looking kind of bleak after that first round, to be honest. Not that he got dominated in the first round, and I thought, okay, Yan usually loses the first round. He's going to win the second and third, but after that first round, you're looking at the resume, you're like, oh my goodness, he lost 4 out of his last 5. Now he just dropped the first round of Song Yadong in a 3-round fight. It was like craziness. But going into this fight, people kept bringing up his resume, and O'Malley's making comments, oh, Jan's 1 fight away from BKFC. But really, even though Jan's resume looks awful, considering he lost 4 out of his last 5 going into this fight, you add context to it, it's not that bad. He lost to Merab, okay, fair enough. Didn't look horrible in that fight, and look how good Merab is, okay? And it was competitive. It was just Merab just out-cardioed him and just kind of put pressure on him nonstop and just never gave him any room to operate. So fair enough, that's a loss. The fight before that, lost to Sean O'Malley, the current bantamweight champion. That was a brutal split decision robbery, and Petr Yan should have got the win there. Everyone knows that. We play revisionist history with it now, but Sean O'Malley lost that fight. The fight before that was a split decision loss to Aljamain Sterling in the title rematch, and that wasn't a robbery, but it came down to how you scored the first round. And so, I mean, it was super competitive, and it was the first round. It could have went either way. Second and third round went to Aljamain Sterling. Fourth and fifth round clearly went to Yan. First round was razor close. So you add context to it, and then the last fight he lost before that was Aljamain Sterling, where he was dominating, about to get the finish, and threw an illegal knee. So even though he lost 4 out of his last 5, there was only 1 true loss on his resume, and that was Merab Dvalishvili, and people were acting like, oh, Jan's washed up. Jan's going to get cut from the organization. And then after all these losses are adding up, the UFC books him against Song Yadong, young, up-and-comer, super well-rounded, had a competitive fight with Corey Sandhagen, and it was like, this is no layup for Yan, but Yan went out there and proved why he's still one of the best, and I believe that Yan can still get back at bantamweight championship because he has to win over the current champion, Sean O'Malley, in my opinion. Either way, it was super competitive, even though I think Yan clearly won. And that's a dream rematch that I would want to see for 5 rounds. I would have loved to see that original fight be a 5-round fight back at UFC 280, but ultimately we didn't get it. Hope to see that in the future, regardless if O'Malley's champion or not. I would want to see that matchup. But Yan got back on the winning track, and he's still the elite of the elite at bantamweight. Moving on to my next honorable mention, and that is that the welterweight division is finally being saved. And this is really aimed at JDM, Jack Della Maddalena, who's an absolute savage. The welterweight division, for the last few years, outside of Kamaru Usman when he was champion, it was like everyone was ducking everyone. I don't want to fight this guy because he's a grappler. I don't want to fight that guy because I just don't want to fight him. He's a bad stylistic matchup for me. And I'm going to wait out for a title shot, or I'm going to wait out for a number 1 contender fight. I don't want to fight this guy. I don't want to fight that guy. JDM went out there and starched Gilbert Burns in a come-from-behind knockout victory in the 3rd round in a fight that he was getting out-grappled in. It looked like he might even lose the 3rd round. And then he gets the KO win. And then he gets on the mic afterwards and calls out Shavkat Rakhmonov. What a complete savage. And I just love the way the welterweight division is looking nowadays. Because you have JDM, you have Shavkat Rakhmonov, and you have Ian Machado Gary, kind of the new blood in the welterweight division per se. Even though they've been around for a while, they're the guys that are finally getting close to the top of the welterweight division. But before, you had guys like Colby Covington, who's an absolute embarrassment ducking fights. And the welterweight division over the last few years, it's like it was Colby and it was Wonderboy saying, I don't want to, he wrestled in middle school. I don't want to fight him. He's a grappler. No, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. You have JDM calling out Shavkat. You have Ian Machado Gary, who said, look, I want to fight Colby Covington, but after that, I want to fight Shavkat or Usman, and then I want to fight for a title. You have Bilal ready to fight anytime, anywhere, willing to fight during Ramadan. I love that this welterweight division is starting to get active and starting to move, and I hope that Leon Edwards is kind of active. I mean, it's crazy. It's been 3.5 months already, right? 3.5 months since, or 3 months since Leon Edwards defended his belt against Colby. We haven't even heard a sniff of when Leon Edwards is going to fight. There was rumors for 300. That didn't happen. When's it going to happen now? Because 301's in Brazil. Doubt it's happening there. 302, That's the International Fight Week. I don't know if it's going to happen there. So when's it going to happen? So hopefully this welterweight division keeps moving. But either way, honorable mention, welterweight division is being saved, and JDM is an absolute savage. Moving on to my next honorable mention, and this is something that I've seen a lot of people regurgitate, and that Sean O'Malley's masterclass over Marlon Vera in the rematch at 299 proves the first fight was a fluke. And I just totally disagree. I couldn't disagree anymore. That original fight was 4 years ago. And Marlon Vera KO'd him, brutally KO'd him on the ground. Just because his leg was injured, that doesn't automatically steal your consciousness. That doesn't steal your consciousness. He didn't get KO'd on the feet. And at the end of the day, who injured his leg? Marlon Vera injured his leg. And to say, oh, well, this proves it. They fought again, they rectified it, and O'Malley outclassed him. O'Malley has gotten substantially better since 2020. A lot of you guys weren't even fans in 2020. That's crazy. You know how many new fans have come into the sport since then? So to act like this wholeheartedly proves that the first fight was a fluke is just crazy, especially considering Marlon Vera followed him to the ground. They were on the ground when he KO'd him with ground and pound from guard. That had nothing to do with his legs. I don't understand why people keep regurgitating, well, it was only because of his leg, blah, 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 blah. Henry Cejudo fought and won against Demetrius Johnson with the same problem, okay? I don't want to hear it. And also, at the end of the day, Marlon Vera injured his leg. But the point I'm getting to is O'Malley's gotten so much better since 2020. Marlon Vera's gotten better, but nowhere near to the level of Sean O'Malley. We knew Sean O'Malley was going to win this fight. We knew it. We all knew it. And he went out there and won the fight, and he won it in dominant fashion. But that's a Marlon Vera who just got outclassed by Corey Sandhagen literally not that long ago. Barely squeaked by Pedro Munoz literally not that long ago. So to act like this somehow proves it, that's like saying Chuck Liddell had 2 wins over Tito Ortiz back in the day. Then they fought a trilogy when they were like 70 years old and Chuck Liddell got KO'd. That's like saying, oh, the first 2 fights were flukes. First 2 fights were flukes because Tito Ortiz won the last one. Makes absolutely no sense. That's like saying the Conor McGregor win over Dustin Poirier way back when was a fluke. Okay? I know Dustin Poirier was nowhere near as good as he is now. Okay? Obviously, we've seen him run it back 2 and 3 times. We've seen both the second and third fight. The thing is, you can add context to it and say, okay, O'Malley wasn't as good as he is now. Fair enough. Fair enough. That doesn't mean it was a fluke, though. So I wanted to cover that. Moving on to my last honorable mention. I debated about putting this on the list, but I said, you know what? There's much more important things to put on the list. But I wanted to have this in this video because I'm not going to make a dedicated video on this, but it's something nobody else will say. And that is that the UFC is force-feeding us political propaganda during pay-per-view cards by showing Donald Trump time and time again. I mean, they must have gave him 10 minutes of airtime on the pay-per-view card total. It was like every time there was a moment, they were cutting to him. Meanwhile, there was something in the cage we wanted to see. You know, after a fight or whatever. They were cutting to him over and over and over again. I mean, Colby Covington, you know, he didn't need his Donald Trump Dune popcorn bucket last night. He could just watch the pay-per-view. Colby probably just bought it just to see Donald Trump there. And the fact they're having this, you know, elaborate walkout with Kid Rock. I don't know if Kid Rock was there, but before was with Kid Rock. This all comes back to a take that I had many, many months ago. And it was the reason Colby Covington got a title shot was not because he was a star, was not because he was a draw. It was because they wanted a mouthpiece to push political propaganda in an election year. And I know people are going to say, oh, Joey, there's people who say you don't like Colby because of his political beliefs. I've never bought any political gear in my entire life. I don't vote. I don't pay attention to the news. I don't want to see politics injected into anything. I understand everyone has the freedom to do whatever they want and talk about whatever they want. I give my opinion on whatever I want, and some of those things may be perceived as political, but I'm just giving my honest opinion. And now we have a broadcast. And keep in mind, Trump hasn't shown up for many, many years up until the last 6 months or year. I don't remember exactly, but he was showing up very rarely. Now it seems like he's showing up for every card. That's an exaggeration, obviously, every pay-per-view. He's having this elaborate walkout. And this all comes from the fact that Dana says, I'm not political. This is what Dana says. I'm not political. But they push this down our throats at the pay-per-view for UFC 299 over and over and over again. And it's just all kind of a pseudo campaign for Donald Trump for president by the UFC because Dana White wants his help, probably with the antitrust lawsuit. Now that's getting into the weeds a bit. I don't know exactly how he could affect that. Maybe I'll look into that in the future. But it's all because he wants political favors because he's friends with Trump and he wants to push Trump and wants to make him win an election and help, I guess, with UFC fan bases, you know. And it's just crazy to me because a lot of fans hate this political stuff when it's not their politics. I hear people say, oh, Bloody Elbow, thank God they're out of business. And you guys know me, I hate Bloody Elbow. but I don't want to see them go out of business. Oh, Bloody Elbow's gone, and they went out of business because they were too busy focused on politics. And what this has taught me is when fans say, get politics out of the sport, what they really mean is get politics I don't like out of the sport. And they want to have this mob mentality and this sycophantic worship of these pseudo deities and Donald Trump and Dana White. They worship Dana White like some people worship, like Colby Covington worships Donald Trump. And I just think it's sickening. I don't want to see a political leader every 5 seconds on a broadcast. That's all I'm saying. It has nothing to do with liking him, disliking him. I don't want to see it no matter who it was. And they're just going to show him over and over and over again. And it was driving me nuts last night. No one else is going to talk about it because I'm sure there's going to be some mob mentality down in the comments. Oh, Joey this, oh, Joey that, and he thinks this, he thinks that. No, I just think it's corny as hell. I don't want to see it. I think it's weird pushing political leaders down our throats. I talked about it time and time again with Colby Covington. I mean, he's Donald Trump's Monica Lewinsky. It's an embarrassment. Now Dana White's walking out with a shit-eating grin on his face like, yeah, this is so cool. We're going to walk out to Kid Rock. And you have MMA media members saying, hey, Dana, you sat ringside with Donald Trump. How was the vibes? What a cornball that media member is. I don't remember who that was, but please slap him upside the head. It'd be a real shame if somebody did. Please don't do it. But yeah, I'm just tired of it. And I think it's going to happen all this year. Mark my words, it's going to happen multiple times this year. And it's just been more and more often over the last 6 months because we're getting into election season, which is the first time I've had a channel doing something like this. And I absolutely hate this type of stuff. So I figured I'd mention it as an honorable mention. Moving on to my actual list, starting off with number 3. And that is that Kevin Holland is the quintessential Bellator fighter, the quintessential PFL fighter. And what I mean by that is the general perception, whether it's actual UFC fighters or even the majority of fans of the UFC, they act as if there's not good fighters in any other organizations. They act like there's not good fighters in PFL. They act like there's not good fighters in Bellator. And that's just simply not true. There are plenty of good fighters in other organizations that can compete in the UFC. And I've said that for a long time. UFC obviously has the most depth of talent. Head to head, in terms of talent, nobody competes with the UFC right now. But with the general perception, okay, that's what we're going off here. The general perception is Bellator fighters suck, they're mid-tier fighters, and so are PFL fighters, and now it's all combined to one because PFL bought Bellator. Kevin Holland was making remarks about Michael Venom Page because of that. You know, Michael Venom Page, there's a reason people pay to come see UFC fighters and not Bellator fighters, and made those remarks, and even afterwards was joking to the media. I got beat by a Bellator fighter. Sorry, guys. Yeah, that's because Bellator fighters are actually skilled, but based on that perception that Kevin Holland had, and a lot of fans have, Kevin Holland belongs in PFL. Kevin Holland belongs in Bellator. And a lot of those guys, those top-level guys in the welterweight division from PFL, from Bellator, now it's all combined, would beat Kevin Holland. Let's look at some fighters from PFL, or I guess Bellator now that it's combined, whatever you want to talk about. There's some fighters from that organization, now it's all PFL, who would easily beat Kevin Holland. Logan Storley would easily out-grapple Kevin Holland. Yaroslav Amaslav would easily out-grapple Kevin Holland and beat him. And so would Douglas Lima, would beat him on the feet and out-grapple him as well. So, and he got beat by MVP, who a lot of people called a bum for years when he was getting hyped up by Bellator. Kevin Holland has one of the worst resumes I've ever seen, and for some reason, the fan base hypes him up. He lost to Michael Venom Page, okay? He lost to JDM. Not horrible losses by any means. His best win recently is against Michael Chiesa, who's a dead body. Fight before that was kind of losing to Santiago Ponzinibbio and then would just rock him at the end of every round. Fight before that got absolutely dirted by Wonderboy Thompson and he quit on the stool. And he quit against MVP as well. He didn't want to fight MVP at all. He was done after the second round. He didn't want to fight anymore. Got ragged out and destroyed by Khamzat Chimaev. He beat Tim Means. Oh, boo-hoo, woohoo. Beat Alex Oliveira. Oh, yeah. Got dominated by Marvin Vettori. Got dominated by Derek Brunson. Kevin Holland got hyped up over a weird KO win over Jacare Souza, who was aging and didn't belong in the UFC. Kevin Holland should be cut and sent to PFL as a gift for them because he can be one of their kind of stars over in PFL because he talks a lot and fans like him. But the truth is, Kevin Holland's barely a gatekeeper for the top 15, and he has Dana White privilege because he's friends with Dana White. That's it. That's why he gets these fights that are kind of stylistically favorable matchups to him. They tried to get him in the top 10 against Wonderboy. Wonderboy beat the piss out of him. Okay? He has a win over Michael Chiesa. Woo, that's his best win in the last... I mean, maybe you want to say Tim Means is a better win. I don't know. I don't think so. I guess Ponzinibbio would be the best win maybe at 287. But either way, you get my point. Kevin Holland is not that good. People always say, every time there's a short notice fight available, they're like, oh, I know a guy. Why do you want to see Kevin Holland stepping on short notice? He loses every single fight. Every time he's never stepped in on short notice in the UFC and won a fight. So you tell me. Why are people hyping up Kevin Holland? And the guy that people say, oh, MVP's a can crusher. He's a bum from Bellator. Came in and absolutely bullied Kevin Holland in the clinch, bullied him on the feet, and embarrassed him at UFC 299. So this takeaway is that Kevin Holland's not good. He's barely a gatekeeper for the top 15. He doesn't belong in the rankings. And honestly, he's a quintessential PFL and Bellator fighter, the way fans and Kevin Holland act like the skill level of all PFL and Bellator fighters are. Send Kevin Holland to PFL. I don't want to see him fight in the UFC ever again. He would lose to Logan Sterling. He would lose to Yaroslav Amasov. He would use to Douglas Lima, and there's probably other names that I'm not thinking of right now. I think Magomed Kirimov is a PFL champion right now, would beat Kevin Holland right now. Would beat him right now. So I don't want to see Kevin Holland ever fight again. Moving on to number 2 on my list, and this is kind of a two-piece. And I already made a dedicated video about one part of this. But that is that Benoit Saint-Denis was overrated and he got exposed by Dustin Poirier at UFC 299. But also, Mateusz Gamrot is being heavily underrated by the MMA community. Let's start off with Benoit Saint-Denis, though. Benoit Saint-Denis, and I already made a full video breaking this down, so I don't want to go too much in depth. I literally just recorded it an hour ago. It's out on the channel right now. Go check it out. But Benoit Saint-Denis got a big jump up in competition against Dustin Poirier, and I know there's the excuse he had staph infection. Dustin Poirier outclassed him on the feet. You go back and rewatch it, it was worse than I even realized live. Anytime they got into space and they weren't like clinched up and close together or on the ground, Dustin Poirier was landing at will, rocked him multiple times. And the only reason Dustin Poirier ended up on his back multiple times is because of a horrible game plan. So the fact you have Dustin Poirier over 35, coming off a brutal KO loss, and physically has the worst possible game plan ever, and Benoit Saint-Denis still gets starched out in the second round, I just think he got exposed. I think he was overrated. I think I overrated him. I don't think he's a fraud. I think people saying he's a fraud are crazy. I still think he's a top 15 talent for sure. But we're watching him beat guys like Matt Favola. We're watching him beat guys like Thiago Moises and Ismael Bonfim. That's nowhere near the level of a guy like Dustin Poirier. And Dustin Poirier showed that there's levels to this game. And I think that Benoit Saint-Denis, a lot of fans got too carried away. I picked Benoit Saint-Denis. I thought this was a 50-50 fight. I just thought Benoit Saint-Denis would be able to out-grapple Dustin Poirier because he would make mistakes on the ground like he always does. I was proven wrong. He was able to defend the rear naked choke attacks, even though he pulled guillotine 3 times to go to guard, and he looked for a guillotine 6 different times throughout this fight. Worst game plan I've ever seen, but still exposed Benoit Saint-Denis and finishes him by brutal KO in the second round. And then in terms of Mateusz Gamrot, so many people just shitting on Mateusz Gamrot again and again and again and again. We got to give this guy some respect, okay? He has a win over Rafael Dos Anjos. I know Rafael Dos Anjos is getting up there in age. I still think it's a quality win for Gamrot. I still think it's a very good, and it just shows how good his grappling is. RDA gets out-grappled, but against welterweights, elite-level wrestlers at welterweight. We're talking Kamaru Usman in his prime, Colby Covington in his prime, Leon Edwards in his prime. We're talking, I think he got out-grappled by Michael Chiesa, arguably in his prime as well, but it was these bigger guys at welterweight that were out-grappling him. We haven't really seen a guy out-grapple RDA at lightweight, and we've seen Gamrot do it, and he faced adversity in the first round. Then you go to the Fiziev fight. It was a very competitive fight up until the injury. The injury happened in the second round. It was a close fight up until that point. The fight against Jalen Turner, he took on short notice. People hype up Jalen Turner and, act like he's a future champion, which I'm very high on Jalen Turner. But the point is, Mateusz Gamrot flew halfway across the world on short notice and beat Jalen Turner. Some people say it was a robbery. I think Gamrot clearly won that fight, 29-28. The loss to Beneil Dariush, fair enough. I understand Beneil Dariush, that loss hasn't aged rather well. But Beneil Dariush was just, styles make fights. And Beneil Dariush, excellent grappling, excellent scrambles. And then the Arman Tsarukyan fight, it was a very close fight. I thought it was borderline a robbery. I thought Arman won the fight. And especially when I saw the scorecards, it was a round where Arman dropped Gamrot. And it was a close round. And somehow the judge gave it to Gamrot instead of Arman, which was crazy. But at the end of the day, look at the level of this guy's fighting. I mean, his last few fights, Arman Tsarukyan, Beneil Dariush, Jalen Turner, Rafael Fiziev, Rafael Dos Anjos. What more do you want from this guy? So I think Gamrot, even though I understand adding context to this, there's reasons to kind of be critical of Gamrot's resume. I think people are now underrating him because of, the injury to Fiziev, and because RDA is older, and because, Jalen Turner had some success, and because of the loss to Beneil Dariush. I think people are underrating him now, so I wanted to add that to the list. So number 2 takeaway was Benoit Saint-Denis is overrated and Mateusz Gamrot is severely underrated. Moving on to my number 1 takeaway from UFC 299. If you watch my post-fight, you're already going to know what I'm getting at with this. And that is, and this drives me nuts, I'm actually getting angry thinking about it, and I very rarely get angry about anything. I am sick and tired of undeserved title shots. We're wasting months upon months upon months just for undeserving title contenders to fight for the belt and shit the bed, okay? We waited from August to mid-March, from mid-August to mid-March to watch Marlon Vera get an undeserved title shot. And then what did he do? He went out there and completely shit the bed, got destroyed. Got 50-44 on one judge's scorecard. I think it should have been a 50-45 on all the judges' scorecards. But either way, he got dominated. Had no success at all. Got absolutely brutalized, took a lot of damage. Honestly, you could have made a case that the corner should have stopped it. He was unrecognizable by the end of the fight. We waited 7 months for that. 7 months. And we all knew going into the fight, Sean O'Malley was going to win. I don't know what the Tapology percentages were, but I would assume they were like 90-10. If you were picking Cheeto to win, you were picking him to fluke it. Basically a KO, catch him with a KO, circling or something along those lines. You were counting on O'Malley to gas. Nobody expected Marlon Vera to win. And while this was a masterclass from Sean O'Malley, I'm not trying to shit on Sean O'Malley by any means. He was supposed to do this. This is what he was supposed to do. And we waited 7 months for this. Think about the fights we could have had instead. We could have had him against Marab. We could have had him against Sandhagen. Those would have been much better fights and much more meaningful fights and deserving fights. Why are we becoming WWE in that? I still can't get over the fact from March of 2023, where Leon Edwards made his first title defense against Kamaru Usman, we waited till mid-December to watch Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. Colby Covington shows up off 2 years, only beating dead bodies, 1 fight win streak, and we're watching him shit the bed against Leon Edwards, not even try to fight and get absolutely dominated. Should have lost every single round, in my opinion. I know he technically got the 5th round, but he should have even lost that round. Did absolutely no damage. Then goes out and goes on a diatribe about he got robbed because of his political beliefs. What a joke. We wasted all that time. We wasted 9 months to watch that. Then we wasted 7 months to watch this. This is becoming WWE, and I'm just so sick and tired of undeserved title shots turning into non-competitive fights, because that's why, and I understand, people who can earn title shots can end up in non-competitive fights, but they are far more likely to end up being competitive when you have a guy that's riding the high of a win streak, who looks better than ever, fighting a champion who looks better than ever. You're far more likely to get a competitive fight, but instead we got to watch Marlon Vera get brain damage for 5 rounds, and there was never a moment of doubt of who was going to win that fight. We got to watch Colby Covington look slow and old and washed up, getting beat up by Leon Edwards from range and not even barely shooting on takedowns. Why are we wasting all this time when we could get much better matchups? We need more of a semblance of meritocracy. We should all advocate for a semblance of meritocracy. I'm tired of these handouts. Oh, well, O'Malley and Vera 2 is a great storyline. This isn't WWE. Go watch the Royal Rumble. Go watch WrestleMania. O'Malley versus Marab at 299 would have been so much better. I'm really looking forward to that fight. I hope it happens. So my number one takeaway, we have to start pushing back with the UFC giving out these undeserved title shots. We all collectively have to push back against it. I don't want to see any more of them. We're wasting time and we're holding up divisions. Also, a guy can go out there and clearly lose. And I get it. We can have the shocking upset like Sean Strickland. But what's the point? Then we don't even get to see the fight we wanted to see originally, which was Adesanya versus Duplessis. And I know that may happen now that Duplessis won the belt, but that's besides the point. Why are we getting these undeserved title fights to watch guys go out there and just shit the bed and not even be competitive because they don't deserve the title fight to begin with? I absolutely hate it. I absolutely despise it. And, it was just sickening. By the time the main event ended, I'm like, this was a great card. I got to applaud the UFC for this card, but this main event shit the bed. It was not competitive. It wasn't fun to watch. It wasn't fun to watch. It was like watching Glover beat up the dead body Anthony Smith years ago. It's like, damn, I'm starting to feel sorry for him. So we got to stop doing this. It's just a waste of time. We have to give guys who have earned their shot, give them the title fights, and let's see what happens then. There might be a lopsided performance, fair enough, but it's far less likely to happen when you have a deserving contender fighting the champion. But there's all my takeaways for UFC 299. I actually have a bunch more probably I could come up with. If there's anything I missed, or what were your guys' takeaways from UFC 299, let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.